Welcome to Bunch Formation, your newest favorite college football show. I am Chris Vannini. You know, it's great to see what a player like Carson Beck can do with great coaching.
And I am David Ubben. I would hope we get an off-season head coach roast battle every year now. Kirby Smart, his real name's Clarence. 8 Mile, a documentary, Chris, I guess.
You know, I actually lived not far from 8 Mile when I lived in Ferndale, Michigan. 8 Mile is the divide between Detroit and the suburbs. Great movie. When that movie came out, I was in high school, and we went on a band trip somewhere, and we'd see other kids from other bands and other schools, and all they wanted to ask us was if Detroit was really like that in the movie 8 Mile.
Is Cranbrook indeed a private school, Chris?
Yes, it is.
All right.
Good hockey program there. Played some hockey games there. Yes, they got a great museum that you go to as a kid growing up. So anyway, that is that. Yes, welcome to the show, guys. We're going to talk about the impromptu roast battle between Kirby Smart and Mario Cristobal that happened Monday night. We're going to hit a couple other quick news things, and then we're going to give our head coaching grades. We think we're probably done with the head coaching carousel now, so let's give some grades that are 100% going to hold up and look great 4 years from now when they're all still coaching and winning championships. So looking forward to that. In the coming weeks and episodes, we'll have a coach interview coming up. We're recording that pretty soon. Some more kind of themed episodes as we're in the off season. Got some good feedback from you guys on the Portal episode with Sam, the CFB 26 episode with Jason, heard from some people around EA Sports and answered some questions, shared some thoughts on that. So good to have those guys on, and we'll have them again on certainly more in the future.
We're going to check out about the EA feedback off air, Chris. But
speaking of EA, by the way, Sam Khan, minutes before we recorded this episode, him and I went to overtime in Red River in our online dynasty. I pulled out a victory. I'm still feeling the buzz coming off that game. Crazy
dramatic game.
I missed a 42-yard field goal short as regulation expired. Sam dropped an open touchdown with 2 minutes left, but we get to overtime, and I get the win. Sooners are looking pretty good here. And you and I will play at the end of the season, the Bunch Formation Bowl, which we'll have on the YouTube channel and let you know when that comes up. If you want to jump ahead, check out the show notes. We got timestamps in there. Please follow us on other social medias if you're on there. It actually really does help. Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, especially YouTube. We're getting really close to 700 YouTube subscribers, which is, I think, a big deal for us for a show that just kind of had to start a whole new feed and all that kind of stuff. So really appreciate folks who are doing that. And please leave us a review. We will read them on the show. Don't have any this week, but we did get, David, a Spotify comment from listener Renee Jarden 1997, who says, 1, Dave's wife has great taste. I love the Horizon games.
Okay. They look interesting. I just don't like that style of game. I guess there's a movie coming out also.
I have no idea. And 2, had to come back and call out Dave for that salad dressing. Come on, man.
No, I stand behind the salad dressing take. Again, if I'm going to pay that much for dinner, I'm going to want to enjoy it. So I do regret forgetting, but listen, when you get the babysitter in the house, you got 2 kids, we got a reservation to make, we were hustling, and I forgot. I got literally 4 minutes away from our house, and I looked to my wife and I said, I forgot the dressing, and she was very pleased.
The responses to that were pretty much overwhelmingly against you for that, so it's good to know our listeners have good manners.
For my time, these takes will age well eventually. So,
all right. First thing we're going to do, talk about some news, and to do that, we get into the media scrum.
That's why I don't read the newspaper, because it's garbage.
So, as we mentioned, Kirby Smart and Mario Cristobal just started roasting each other out of nowhere in Gainesville. So, there were the Steve Spurrier Awards, basically, that were going on I think it was Monday, and it was the Football Writers Association Offensive Player of the Year, Malachi Toney. Defensive Player of the Year, Freshman of the Year, was Ellis Robinson from Georgia. That's what brought the coaches in. And Steve Spurrier's there. I think that's where they have the first-year coach award as well. And I'll set this up to say that. And it starts with Kirby Smart. I pulled the audio here, dognation.com. They have the video. I'll link to the YouTube videos of it in the show notes, but I just wanted to pull the audio. They got the video. This isn't like a secret leak or anything. It's like they're speaking to a crowd in front of a microphone. And Kirby Smart's up talking about Ellis Robinson and his family and like a birthday party the family was having. And that leads into, I'll play the clips from both of them. They're like 1 to 2 minutes long. So this was Kirby Smart starting off.
Comes to that, but we probably sponsored that trip with all the NIL money we spent, so I promise you that's a good, safe bet, but that's all right. They deserve it. Mario's right behind him, and if it had been up to him, he would have paid a lot more NIL money because it came down to us too, so I don't like you being real close to Mario right now, you know what I'm saying? He's still got another year left. Got to be careful around Mario. Sometimes he'll take your players, if you know what I mean. But, no, I'm just kidding. It's all right. I was talking to Mario earlier, and he came up to me, and he gave me a Lane Kiffin joke. And he and Lane are very similar in a lot of ways. They're like best friends. And he came up to me, he's like, you ought to start getting on some protein shakes. You've had too many carbs. And I said, well, you probably ought to spend some time with Steve Spurrier because he won more conference championships at Duke than you have in Miami. So Coach Spurrier and him got to visit some. I don't know why you're over here laughing too now. Coach Sumrall, I got to ask you a question. I'm out. Your daughter is a realtor? Did I hear that right? Is she the best realtor in Gainesville?
Steve Spurrier.
One of the best. Okay. Well, you're the fourth coach I've played since being at Georgia, so she's getting a lot of money sold houses. She's going through them. And I have tremendous respect for this town. I had no idea how great a basketball town this really was. You know what I mean?
So Kirby Smart's just taking shots at everybody. Jon Sumrall's there in the crowd. I texted Jon Sumrall about how funny it all was. He thought it was hilarious. Keep that in mind. This is all in jest. Everybody's having fun.
I want to know if he had a guy write jokes for him. Because certainly it's not off the cuff, I guess, but it's pretty good material. I gotta say,
Kirby's a good ball buster guy.
Yes.
Probably one of the best coaches at doing that. He's a very witty dude, so that wouldn't surprise me. So that happens. Part of the Ellis Robinson thing, and the Malachi Tony thing happens, and Mario comes up. Mario Cristobal comes up after that, and he's ready. He decides he's got some responses.
I'll tell you what. The first thing is, it's a great piece right there to watch what a player like Carson Beck could do with great coaching. You know what I mean? But no, seriously, let's give it up for Kirby Smart. Let's give it up. Let's give it up for Kirby Smart. I mean, if it wasn't for all his years of pre-NIL, we wouldn't have NIL right now anyways, right? So, but did you reach the podium here? I don't know. I don't remember that. Robinson family, great seeing you. We leave at 9:30 on the Real Jet, okay? We have more than one restaurant in Miami as opposed to Athens, but we could get to that. But certainly appreciate being here. I know I could go on for a little bit now, But no, you got to give a guy like Kirby credit. When you have all that time to sit at home watching us play on TV throughout the playoffs, when you don't take care of business, But congratulations on the SEC and the championship. That's awesome. We were 5-0 against the SEC. I don't know what you were, but. Man, I'm in enemy territory too. I got a feeling some of you are on Kirby's side. But no, you guys are super professional. I've never felt so welcome in enemy territory, except last year at the Swamp, 41-17. But
Florida just
getting straight, man.
Getting hit from both sides. All right, this was so funny. And I'm so glad this happened in a public setting because, sometimes when we're at events and you hang around some coaches and they kind of let loose a little bit and they can be really funny, but you rarely see this happen in public. Mm-hmm. And, I think everybody just took it as, fun. No one seemed to, take it actually seriously. The clips are hilarious. Before we debate a winner, what did you make of this whole thing when you first saw it?
I mean, it's surprising because, like you said, not as necessarily as curated a list of a set, doing a tight five. You don't see that as much, but you hear coaches talk about each other and their programs all the time. If you're texting them or you see them at something and you ask about like, what do you think about this or that? So like, it's not shocking that they would say this because again, for a lot of coaches, the public persona is different than how they are in private for most coaches. Because there's a politician aspect to a lot of this stuff, but it is interesting, and I don't know what it was about this event that brought this out. Maybe it was just Spurrier.
It was
being in the building.
Everybody had to do their best Spurrier, I guess.
I guess, but that was even Spurrier. It was even further than Spurrier would go usually, and so. Yeah, I liked seeing it. I suspect some of that stuff might come back at some point in the season. We'll see how these games play out in the fall. But I enjoyed it. It's nice to see coaches let their hair down a little bit. February, not too bad for the college football content machine, right?
Like, I feel like we need to completely change the college football awards, get it back to being an event where everybody's in town, and then turn it into a roast like this. There aren't really these events very often anymore where we kind of celebrate and have fun with the sport. Like the NFL has the NFL honors thing, but for the Super Bowl, they have comedians and they crack jokes. College football doesn't have that. And so this just felt
they
so
used to with the college football awards and earmuffs if you're on the Heisman Trust and you're listening. The Heisman broadcast is unwatchable. I haven't watched it in years. But the college football awards were weren't that fun, but it was sort of a celebration of the sport. But if you did it, you would have to kind of do it now. And at that point, then I wonder, you got guys off to the pros. It'd be kind of hard, and
right. The calendar and
stuff would be hard.
Just makes it tough.
But with the playoff and with the portal and signing day being where it is, the calendar may just have killed college football awards. I mean, those have been dead for a while. And the current awards that they do, where it's like an ESPN thing, where it's
pre-taped thing.
Yeah,
no one's
not,
there in person.
I haven't been watching that. I don't really enjoy that, but
no.
Yeah, I miss it, and. Maybe this event can become something. This is the first time I've heard of this event. Like this award has been around a few years. Fellow Football Writers Association of America, person Mike Griffith has kind of been spearheading the Spurrier Award for a few years. And it's not very old, but I haven't heard of this event happening. So maybe this will be the thing, and maybe we'll get to hear more stuff like this in the years to come. Let's hope. It was very funny.
Yeah, it was funny. Again, it wasn't like some leak of a comment from a locker room or whatever. It was just open, and maybe it's because it's February and because we're out of the season and guys can relax. But
and recruiting is pretty much done. That probably
we're in a dead period. Yeah. So okay. To you, who won of the two?
I mean, I'm gonna probably go Cristobal just because you got the whole thing about getting to the national championship, and also it's a results business, Chris. I say that. How many times do I say that? 5-0 against the SEC. Got to joke about Kirby Smart, who had probably a better roster than Miami did this year, sitting at home. So yeah, I got to go. Cristobal gets the W here, and it's nice. Listen, Mario Cristobal spent plenty of time in the SEC, but anytime you get somebody from the ACC or the Big 10 or the Big 12, needling the SEC for its pre-NIL days, it's always good. So well played, Mario. Maybe now we can bring back the turnover chain. Maybe we'll see.
I'm gonna go Mario Cristobal as well because he kind of had the roast cadence down. Kirby's a good kind of ball buster, but Cristobal deliver a line and then be like, but anyway, and then you wait for the applause and the laughter to stop you, and then to go. I don't know if he just came up with that or what, but Cristobal, especially around the championship, a guy who was so laser focused, and to see him let his hair down was fun. These guys worked together, by the way, when they were at Alabama, so they know each other. Yes, recruiting battles get heated and all that kind of stuff, but there's absolutely a respect among each other for all that stuff. So I thought this was great. I hope nobody's upset by it. I want to encourage coaches having fun and doing stuff like that. So this just came out of nowhere Monday night, and I was like, we got to talk about it. We got to pick a winner because I thought it was so hilarious in a sport where everybody acts like a politician. It was great. It was great. So shout out to both those guys for doing that. Elsewhere in news, Army coach Jeff Monken told our colleague at The Athletic, Seth Emerson, that he would be interested in moving Army-Navy to Thanksgiving weekend. That would free stuff up for the playoff. It would impact the conference championship because currently it's a non-conference game after the American Conference Championship between Army and Navy. Navy's AD came out on Tuesday and said he's not really interested in that. This isn't probably going to happen, or at least not like this. Like, Jeff Monken doesn't have any control over what happens with this. This is like the Army-Navy game is a gigantic operation. It's got its own TV deal with CBS, and I can tell you CBS ain't interested in moving it off of that open to yourself time slot that, oh, by the way, the president tweeted about keeping, a month ago. So I don't know. I still think this is unlikely. And I've talked to people on both sides who are also not very interested in it. But Jeff Monken, the coach, openly saying that was a little bit different than what we've heard.
Well, that exclusive window, Chris, is probably on borrowed time at this point. And I've liked having Army-Navy where it is, it's been, 15, 20 years, something like that, where it's kind of been in that empty Saturday leading into the Heisman. And it's kind of the first weekend where I'm not killing myself trying to get stuff done or running around. So it's nice to sit back and watch a football game. But the playoff is expanding. They're going to need those weekends. That exclusive window, like I said, is not always going to be there. And it's really inconvenient for the rest of the sport where you talk about the American title game. And if one of those teams is in playoff contention, that gets complicated as well. So, I appreciate Jeff Monken here because, one of the reasons why, I get annoyed with the Rose Bowl, Chris, was they held up playoff expansion for a long time. And, if you're Jeff Monken or if you're the people involved in the Army-Navy game, there's the potential not to hold it up, but to make this thing more complicated than it needs to be. And if you move to that Thanksgiving weekend, it does simplify a lot. So, we'll see where this thing ends up. But, if you don't want to move it because of the exclusive TV window, I just think, that's not going to work out for you. And maybe you can play this thing on that Friday after Thanksgiving, where maybe you don't have the same type of exclusive window. Maybe there's only one other game, two other games happening at that point, and you can figure something out. Because where it is, the playoff is about to take that over. And so you can say, oh, we don't want to move it, but you're sort of, ruining your own game if you just are committed to holding that line.
Well, playoff's not expanding yet, and we don't know when.
But eventually, Chris.
And yes. It's a hard game to move because it's not just a normal game. There's incredible sponsorships. You got to get the cadets and all the troops in, the military planning. It is such. I've covered that game. Have you ever been to that game, by the way?
I haven't. It's on my list. That Army-Navy is near the top of the list. BYU is very high on the list. Montana, North Dakota State, very high on my list. But I have not been to those games.
Yeah, it's a very cool environment. And again, they're booked out for many years in the future. So it's a very complicated thing to do. But I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon here or not. It was just Monken just said it to our colleague while they were kind of talking about some other stuff. And we kind of decided to write on it. But there's not a big push to change that at the moment. And again, that message from the president the day before the playoff the playoff commissioners met in Miami was not a coincidence with that timing, and the playoff was caught off guard by that. So the people in charge of that game are making their voices heard through other means that they're not going to go quietly in moving that game. So we will see on that. Another bit of news happened last week, but we never talked about it. Joey Aguilar, the quarterback for Tennessee, was denied an injunction to try to play another year of college football. He's probably going to appeal or whatever, but it's looking unlikely now that he is going to play college football next year, which kind of surprised me. You kind of never know, but his was a little bit different situation than some others. He had played literally started for 4+ years of college football, 4 in junior college, I think. And there was a COVID year in there, 2 at App State, then Tennessee. And so the Tennessee quarterback battle will now move forward without him. And Dave, just as someone who knows that program well, what do you make of the news and what this means for Tennessee at quarterback?
Well, it sounds like the judge didn't want to make a precedent that could be cited in similar cases moving forward, and that was part of his discomfort. It is surprising. You mentioned the home court piece of this that has helped a lot of schools win these eligibility cases. I wasn't in the weeds on the exact details of this case. It sounded like it was mild optimism from the people that I had talked to about the possibility. So I was a little bit like you, surprised as well. But I don't know that there were like fundamental differences between his case and Diego Pavia's case. But ultimately, like for Tennessee, it's a little bit nerve-wracking. They went and swung hard at the quarterback portal market, missed. And so now you've got George McIntyre, who, a four-star guy, has been in the program a couple of years. And then you have Faison Brandon, I think he's the number one quarterback in the class coming through. He'll be a true freshman. You need one of those guys to show that they can be the guy in the spring. And, Ryan Staub came in from Colorado, but I think, from what I understand, that's probably a backup situation regardless. Guy's played a good bit of college football, but doesn't necessarily have the tools that you would want from an SEC starter. So they need one of those guys to show up, and I think the spring will be interesting there, but surprising for them. I'm curious also if they pushed this as hard, if they had landed Sam Levitt or some of these other portal QBs that they were chasing in the offseason.
It'll be interesting. Tennessee and Alabama now are pretty much going through regular quarterback battles, things that we don't normally see in today's game. Usually if you don't have a guy, you're bringing in a portal guy, and instead they're going to have Austin Mack and Keelan Russell battle it out at Alabama and these two guys at Tennessee. So that'll be interesting to watch in spring. And elsewhere in lawsuit news, on Tuesday, Virginia quarterback Chandler Morris sued to try to get a 7th year of eligibility. He has actually played in a season for 6 years. 2020 was a COVID year, didn't count. And he redshirted in 2021. He is trying to get another type of redshirt for 2022, in which he was injured, but did play parts of 4 games. Again, this is coming kind of late in the process, but I think the Trinidad Chambliss result is possibly opening the doors for some guys trying to do this medical type of thing. Because remember, Trinidad Chambliss was partially the case was based on the NCAA is supposed to act in the best interest of its players by basically giving them waivers and not denying them. And Chandler Morris's was denied in January. So another one here. Any thoughts?
No, I mean, Chandler Morris is a guy that probably doesn't have the NFL measurables. And if you can stick around and play another season of college football, you're probably going to make $1, $2, $3 million. Chandler Morris is a good college quarterback. So there's no real downside to this. He's already gotten denied by the NCAA. He didn't get his waiver. And so if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and you can see what happens at the next level. But if it does work, there's so much money on the line that there's a lot of reason to chase this. So, we'll see how it shakes out. I don't know that we're going to see a ton of like tectonic shifts if he wins it, but certainly Virginia would be happy. So,
yeah, even part of the Chambliss thing, it was like they denied it because the documentation was kind of sketchy, but also like Trinidad Chambliss didn't like play 4 years at Ferris. He didn't like start for 4 years and then go to Ole Miss and play again. Like he hadn't played a ton there, and you can at least understand like, all right, this Trinidad Chambliss was not a guy who played so long that he needs another year. Joey Aguilar did. He has played a lot of college football. Chandler Morris has played a lot of college football. And those are the ones where I think it's like, all right, college football is not supposed to be forever. I understand there's money to be made, probably more than the NFL for these guys, and go for it. But I think some of the sympathy is a little bit different for those types of guys. So we'll monitor that. Keep an eye on theathletic.com as well to see what happens with that. Okay, so let's move into our coaching grades. And to do that, we move into the heat check.
Analytics, throw them in the garbage.
We had 33 head coaching changes in this cycle. 34 if you count Northern Illinois, which happened at the last moment. Thomas Hammock going to the Seattle Seahawks. They promoted the DC from within, so it's not really a hired to really type of grade. But I figure we'll go one by one through these. We'll work backwards from the order in which they were filled, because that was kind of the way I had it written out. David, you ready?
Let's do it.
Michigan hires Kyle Whittingham in maybe the most shocking coaching move of the carousel. Sharon Moore fired late in the year when news of a relationship with a staffer comes out, and they hire away Kyle Whittingham, who had just stepped away from coaching and quasi-retired at Utah. This was a bit unexpected. Michigan tried to get Kalen DeBoer and some other guys. They circled back on Kyle Whittingham. David, what's your grade?
I'm going to give this an A because they upgraded. And Chris, I don't know a lot of country music songs. You know this. But I do know Rascal Flatts, who once said, "God bless the broken road that led me straight to you." And that is the Michigan coaching search.
That is. By the way, you're the Southerner here. You would know the country music more than me.
Well, there's some other differences here, Chris, that are preventing me from locking into country music.
Fair enough. I gave this an A-. I think, Kyle Whittingham was on my list of the 25 greatest college coaches of the 2000s. His overachieving at Utah, undefeated seasons, moving into the Pac-12 and winning the Pac-12. We know that he is a very, very good coach. And given the difficult timing of all of that, it's about as best as you could hope for. If this happens a couple of weeks prior, you're probably looking at Michigan head coach Matt Campbell. But
do you only go A- because it's sort of a stopgap? Like, I don't know that 5 years, certainly not 10 years, but maybe 5 years from now, Whittingham's not there.
Here's why I'm going with A-. We have not seen Kyle Whittingham do it anywhere else but Utah. Now, he overachieved there, but he's going up against he beat Oregon a bit when he was there, but he's going up against Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon, some like elite level programs. And his expectation here is not to go 8-5 and the fans are okay with it, or a 9-4. The expectations are to win national championships. And we don't know how he will work in that situation. It's a totally new place where he's never lived or recruited before. So it wasn't as much of a natural fit. That's why I give it an A-. But he did keep Bryce Underwood. And that was probably the most important thing you could do there. So good stuff there. Ohio promotes John Hauser, defensive coordinator to the head coach. Another one here that happened because of relationships involving the head coach that led Brian Smith to get fired before the bowl game. Hauser coached the bowl game against UNLV and they won. I'm giving this a B. I think it's solid. And it's the third consecutive time Ohio has promoted from within since Frank Solich. Frank Solich was there, turned the program around, really good MAC team. He was replaced by Tim Albin. Albin won a MAC championship, went to Charlotte. He was replaced by Brian Smith, who had a good season, but gets fired. And now Hauser gets promoted as well. So they've kind of continued to promote from within. It's worked there. One of the most consistent MAC teams. I'm going to give it a B. Promoting from within is hard, but I think it's solid.
Yeah, considering the circumstances, B seems fair. And I think the one thing is, if you're going to have 3 coaches in 3 years, 3 times promoting from within is probably the best way to do it. So we'll see. And
they've kept winning. So you want to keep that continuity in place. Missouri State hires Casey Woods, the offensive coordinator at SMU. He's the son of former South Carolina and App State head coach Sparky Woods. Didn't call the offensive plays at SMU, but helped coordinate one of the best offenses in the ACC. What do you think?
It's hard to say because he is a little inexperienced, but the people that I don't know Casey, but the people that I know that do know him speak really, really highly of him, and he's extremely well regarded. So I'll go B- just because unproven, but what Missouri State and what that job is capable of, we don't really know yet in the modern era. So I'll go B- there just because of the experience factor. So what about you?
Yeah, I went B- as well. I was kind of surprised. Like, I thought he could have gotten even a better job. Like, he's been in the mix for a lot of Group of 5 head coaching jobs, and this is one that was FCS just literally a couple of years ago. but their coach Ryan Beard moved on, which we'll get to him later on. I think it's B- mostly because he's ready for a head coaching job, but it is also a bit of a difficult job as they move into their second FBS season. So I'll give it a B-. That takes us back around to Utah, which promoted longtime defense coordinator Morgan Scalley. He was a designated coach in waiting, then lost that title when some news came out about some racial comments he had made back in the day. Eventually got the title back again. And it felt like Utah was ready to move on. Like Kyle Whittingham, we talked to him at Big 12 Media Day last year, and he was like, I think about retiring every year, but he did not want to go out the way the 2024 season went. So he comes back. They have a good year, and he decides to step down. And it felt like Utah was, he didn't force him out, but it kind of did nudge him out. And because of that, Whittingham lands at Michigan and takes Jason Beck, the offensive coordinator, with him. So Scalley's in a difficult spot now. I'm grading this a B. This is the only place he's ever been. He played here. He's coached here. He's been here for 2 decades plus. It's hard to be any more prepared to take over the job. But not only are you replacing the legend of Kyle Whittingham, he has now taken some of your coaches, some of your players. They lost a really good edge rusher, went to Michigan as well. So suddenly this job is a lot harder than they thought it was going to be when they made this move. I'm going to go B.
I'll go B+, just because it seems like, one of the things you didn't mention too is BYU is on the rise, spending well. Certainly
also lost a coach. Also lost a coach because Kyle Whittingham took Jay Hill to Michigan.
Yes, but able to keep Kalani Sitake. I'll go B+ just because I think it's a school generally has a pretty good idea of what they need, and everybody around Utah has seemed very certain that Morgan Scalley was what they needed for their future for a while. And so I don't know a ton about the inner workings of Utah, but when so many people seem united around like, this is the guy that we need to lead our program when Kyle is gone, and then that happens and you kind of have a seamless transition, I'll go B+, just because there's something to be said for not having a lot of infighting, not having a lot of palace intrigue when a guy like Kyle Whittingham leaves his post.
The head coach in waiting thing, like there was that period in like the early 2010s. It was very popular. James Franklin was once a head coach in waiting at Maryland. Will Muschamp at Texas.
Jimbo Fisher.
Neither of those happened. It did happen at Florida State with Jimbo Fisher, who did win a national championship. So it's kind of mixed, but I do, again, the job Scalley's going to have to do is a bit harder. I would have probably graded this higher if Whittingham didn't take some of the guys with him. I think suddenly the job's a little bit tougher. Washington State hires Kirby Moore from Missouri, the offensive coordinator, and different move for Washington State this time around. They hired Jimmy Rogers from South Dakota State after Jake Dickert left, and Rogers did a pretty good job that first year. He then takes the Iowa State job, which we'll get to. And instead of going for another sitting FCS head coach, Washington State goes with an assistant. Kirby Moore grew up not far from there, the brother of Kellen Moore, played at Boise State, and he was at Missouri the last 3 years. He's only 35 years old. He's recruited at a very, very high level. But it's going to be a learning curve at a job like this. You're not going to have the resources of a Missouri. And going through an AD change at Washington State, you're moving into the new Pac-12. So a lot of change going on. I'm going C+. I get it, but that's a pretty steep learning curve at a time that maybe some stability would have of a sitting head coach might have been better, I think.
Yeah, I'll go B-. I mean, I think some of the administrative stuff, some of that comes out in interviews, and which coach was it that people were laughing about the 700-page binder or whatever that they had? But like a lot of coaches that aspire to be head coaches do have like prepared binders. Like, this is what my program is going to look like. This is what I want to do. And so I'm imagining the combination of being familiar with the Palouse and wanting the job, frankly, for Washington State, which is going through some difficult times, is a good combination. So I'll go B- there.
Coastal Carolina hires the aforementioned Ryan Beard, the sitting head coach at Missouri State. Beard, the son-in-law of Bobby Petrino, replaced Bobby Petrino at Missouri State and did a good job. Like the first year as an FCS team this year, got them to 7-5 in a bowl game because there weren't enough 6-6 teams, so Missouri State got in. And the previous year, they were a top 25 team at the FCS level. So did a good job there. Kind of moves to another part of the country, to a Coastal Carolina program that basically, Tim Beck went to 3 bowl games in 3 years there, but they still fired him because 6-7 isn't, they want to do better than that in the Sun Belt. And Jamie Chadwell had raised the bar there in such a way. And so Beard's going to have a lot more resources than he did at Missouri State. I think they opened up some new facilities there at Coastal. But he hasn't coached in this part of the country either, so that'll be an interesting adjustment. Also, again, just 36 years old, so we got some young head coaches here, but I met Ryan Beard a year ago at Conference USA Media Days and talking to some people. They were like, keep an eye on that guy. He's a good coach. So I think it's a good hire by Coastal. I give it a B+.
Yeah, I didn't love the Tim Beck hire when they made it. It played out kind of a lot like I thought it would. So you're playing upside here with Ryan Beard. I like it. Like you said, I've liked what he has done. His offenses at Missouri State under Bobby Petrino were good. And then for him to continue that was solid. So good. And I hope he just knows it's Chanticleers. Don't say anything else. They'll catch you.
Not Chanticleers. Southern Miss lost Charles Huff, who in one season took the program from 1-11 to 7-5, but then left to take the Memphis job. So Southern Miss promoted from within offensive coordinator Blake Anderson. Anderson had been at Southern Miss before. Some people thought he should have gotten the job way back in 2012 when Larry Fedora left. And instead they hired Ellis Johnson, who went 0-12 and wrecked the program for almost a generation there. Anderson was also the head coach at Arkansas State and Utah State. He'd gone to 9 bowl games in 10 years, 3 conference championships. He was fired at Utah State about a year and a half ago over Title IX issues and the way he did or didn't handle a player reporting some things to him regarding sexual assault. He has sued the school for wrongful termination. I don't remember if that ended or if that was still going on, but I give this a B+. It's a guy who has 10 years of head coaching experience. He knows Southern Miss. He knows the current Southern Miss because he's been there. A B+, I think, is a really good fit.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you can get a coach with that kind of pedigree, that's solid. And Southern Miss has had some kind of weird coaching runs. Chris, do you remember when Todd Monken was the head coach down there?
Todd Monken took over. So Todd Monken took over after Ellis Johnson took the team from top 25 program to 0-12 or 0-11, 0-12. He comes in and within 3 years wins 9 games in a division or conference championship. And then leaves right before signing day, I think, to take the Tampa Bay Buccaneers OC job. And now Monken is the new head coach of the Cleveland Browns. So Southern Miss has been really up and down. There's another former Southern Miss coach on this list, but good program with a lot of support there. Charles Huff did a good job in 1 year to get them up to 7-5. Proud program.
Yeah. I will go A- on this one.
Toledo they lose Jason Candle, head coach, to UConn. And in turn, they hired Mike Jacobs, who was the head coach at Mercer. I think this is a sneaky, really, really, really good hire. Like, if you're wondering, like, who's the next Kurt Signetti type, it might be this guy. He has been a head coach for 10 years at Mercer, Lenoir-Rhyne, and Notre Dame College, a D2 school in Ohio. And in 10 years, he has won 7 conference championships, 6 playoff appearances, and he's never won fewer than 70% of games in a season. He played at Ohio State, former offensive lineman there. He was in the mix for the UAB job as well. He's an Ohio guy, and he takes over a Toledo program that is probably the best resourced in the MAC. And Toledo hasn't had a losing season since 2009, so you'd think the floor is pretty high here. I think this is a really, really good hire. I'm giving this an A-. I almost gave it an A, but I give it an A-. Mike Jacobs at Toledo.
Chris, I've been saying for a long time that these guys who are consistent winners at the lower levels, at multiple places, are an untapped market. We saw that with Bob Chesney, who moved up and up and up and up. Obviously, Curt Cignetti is who Curt Cignetti is. And I think there's a lot of ADs who, when their boosters hear who they're hiring, are rushing and reaching for their checkbook immediately instead of saying, like, who is this guy? And I think you're going to get that reaction from a lot of people when Mike Jacobs comes out. But you look into, again, the coaches who have consistently won at multiple places. I mean, the track record for those guys is tremendously good. I mean, how many of those guys have failed versus how many of those guys have done incredible things? There have been some, but not very many. And I think this one is a good hire, especially when you go to a job as good at Toledo, where you can do some big things. I am going to give this one an A. I won't go A+ on this one, but I'll give it an A. The upside is tremendous here.
Absolutely. Iowa State hires Jimmy Rogers. Iowa State lost Matt Campbell to Penn State. They turn around before Penn State had even announced the hire of Matt Campbell. Iowa State had announced the hire of Jimmy Rogers, who spent 1 year at Washington State, went 6-6, and 3 of those losses were a 3-point loss at Ole Miss, a 2-point loss at Virginia on a weird late safety thing, a 4-point loss at James Madison. That's 2 playoff teams right there. And he was previously the head coach at South Dakota State. He won the national championship in 2023. However, this is his first job in a Power 4 conference. He's no longer one of the top FCS teams. He's no longer kind of in a weird spot with Washington State. You're going to be competing with Texas Tech and BYU and Utah and TCU, and it's not as resourced of a program as some of those other ones. So it's a bit of a tougher spot. I'm going to give it a B. I do like the upside here, but it's been a very quick move for him. And he's going to have to learn to punch way above it. He's going to have to punch above his weight, which they did a bit last year, Washington State, but that's the job here now.
Yeah, I'm going to go B-. Just a really small sample size. I'm going to go last year, Washington State, obviously really impressive. It is 1 year in sort of weird circumstances, and that team was kind of hard to figure out.
They did lose to Oregon State too, by the way. It was a very weird Washington State team.
It very much. You look up 1 week and you're like, oh, okay. And you look the other week and you're like, what's going on with this team?
They lost by like 50 to North Texas. Yeah.
Yeah. And so some of these guys that come out of these FCS powers, the North Dakota States, the South Dakota States, I think North Dakota State especially, it's been hard to figure like how much of that is the program and how much of that is you. They've had really, really mixed results. And so I'm curious how this will play out, but your degree of difficulty, on top of just Iowa State is always going to be punching above its weight. But now Matt Campbell on his way out, swipes a third of your roster. That makes things tough, especially in the Big 12 where, the top end of the Big 12, you look around, you're going to have to deal with Texas Tech. You're going to have to deal with BYU. Oklahoma State's not going to be down for much longer. TCU, Baylor are solid programs. And so you got a lot working against you at the moment. So I'm going to go B-.
Tulane, after going to the playoff, lost Jon Sumrall to Florida. So they promoted from within Will Hall, the former head coach at Southern Miss. He was the pass game coordinator. He was a successful head coach at the D2 level as well. This was a search in which Tulane talked to a lot of people, a lot of outsiders. They almost got Blake Baker, the DC at LSU, but they end up promoting from Baker decides to stay at LSU. They promote from within. It's, Tulane it was a polarizing hire very much, Will Hall, especially within the fan base, because you went from Willie Fritz to Jon Sumrall. Both of them took you to extremely high highs. You were able to hire the guy who had won 2 straight Sun Belt championships in Sumrall. And instead, this time around, you promote from within. And Hall has been an assistant under both those guys. So he has been around to see what it takes to win under Willie Fritz and under Jon Sumrall. He was there when Willie helped build it up. Then he went to go be the head coach at Southern Miss. Had a good start, had a good year there in the middle, but then the bottom fell out very quickly. Just one bowl in his 4 seasons there. Ton of injuries. You remember when Frank Gore was playing quarterback for them? because they had no
that's
quarterbacks
Frank
available.
Gore Jr., Chris. You
Frank Gore
almost
Jr.,
yeah.
yes.
Yes.
So I'm giving it a C. I think there's more upside than people think. And I spent some time inside that program this past season, and you could tell Will Hall was the head coach you leaned on around there. Like, he wasn't the OC, but he was the guy who made sure everything was going right. He's a guy you knew knows how to be a head coach. And Tulane's a job that is one of the best resource G6 jobs. They're going to have one of the highest salary caps, rev share pools there. So I think the floor should be pretty high, but I'm going to give it a C.
Yeah, he's another guy that's won at lower levels before he went to be an assistant. And with Will Hall, also very entertaining coach. His time at Southern Miss.
He is Mississippi Ted Lasso.
Yes.
Like, I do think he has an analogy for everything. He's a very funny guy. I do think he may tone that down a bit this time around. I do think he knows he has to be a bit more, I don't know, presentable, I guess, when you're at a private school like Tulane.
Yeah. So there's that element. And, it's easy to look at what he did at Southern Miss, which is pretty unremarkable, and sort of cast him off. But, a lot of these coaches, the Jimmies and Joes, X's and O's thing is real. And the caliber of player and the roster he's going to have at Tulane, especially in the modern era, is going to be a lot better than what he had at Southern Miss. And he's done enough since then, obviously, to win the confidence of people at a big school like Tulane. So I think there's a lot of upside here that people might be overlooking. So I'm going to go B- on this one, just because it's not really splashy. And I don't maybe know that there'd be the upside of, like when you did get Jon Sumrall coming in there, or Willie Fritz, who could have been a P4 head coach when he came to Tulane. But still, I think there's some upside there. So I'll go B-.
All right. Memphis hires Charles Huff, the previous head coach at Southern Miss. He, again, went from 1-11 to 7-5 in one season. He has been a very, very good job at accumulating talent. He was one of the best recruiters in the country when he was an assistant at Penn State, Alabama. And now you're at Memphis, which has one of the largest roster budgets in the group of six. They should be able to get players there, and I think he will be. And he's taken over a program that's not in a bad place. Like, they are regularly winning 8-9 games, and the fans had gotten a little bit frustrated with Ryan Silverfield for not winning a conference championship. But this is one of the best fits, I think, of all the hires. Like, a guy who knows how to help get talent. He knows how to elevate that talent. He got to Marshall. He won a Sun Belt championship as well. He's very solid, good coach there. And Southern Miss, again, 1-11 to 7-5, and they were playing for the division championship on the last weekend of the regular season. So I think there's huge upside here. I'm giving this an A.
Chris, if you are in the American and you're running the athletic department or the football program, do you have to use like DHL or U.S. Postal Service? Like, you can't be using FedEx, can you? And just keep putting more and more money in the pocket of your...
So, because remember Memphis offered like $200 million in sponsorships to try to get into the Big 12. That's because they got the FedEx money. They also got the Lowe's money and the
Home Depot. If you're in the rest of the American, Home Depot
and AutoZone, I think, was the other one as well.
Advanced Auto Parts, O'Reilly Auto Parts, only in the American.
Yeah, but I like what Huff's going to be able to do here.
Yeah, I like this hire. Again, I think Memphis hasn't really been operating at like top end for a while, and won conference championships since 2014. I think they'd like to change that. I like the Huff hire. I'm going to go B+, A- here, because anytime you can hire a guy that does have a conference championship at the FBS level, that's saying something. I don't care where you are or what you did. Like, that's hard to do. So I'm going to go A-.
Noticing a trend of hiring sitting head coaches here. UConn hired Jason Candle, the head coach at Toledo, after losing Jim Mora to Colorado State. Candle went 81-44 in 10 years at Toledo, 2 MAC championships, no losing seasons. Always did a solid job. I think the criticism would be he didn't win as many MAC titles as he could have at a place that has the most resources. But you knew that they were always going to be solid. They beat Mississippi State a couple of years ago. And I know, like, offensive coaches think he's really, really good. Like, they really like Jason Candle, who has turned down or at least been in the mix for and turned down P4 offensive coordinator jobs. He was in the mix at Miami back in the day, Ohio State for a little bit, but he wanted to stick being a head coach. And if you're wondering why Jason Candle would leave the best job on the MAC for UConn, well, his salary like doubled at least from what it was at Toledo. So UConn's got money. They spend it. They're still an independent, which is a weird spot, but I like it. The question is, can he elevate it? And what do you even elevate it to? Because you're in a weird spot. I'm going to go with a B.
Yeah, independence, if you're not to sidetrack it, but if you're not Notre Dame, independence seems like a very questionable strategy in the 16-team playoff era.
UConn is arguably the only true independent program left because Notre Dame's half independent with the ACC stuff.
So anyway, it's interesting when you can get a guy this accomplished. I mean, Jason Candle's name had been in the mix for a ton of jobs going back almost 10 years. You know, when he got hot early at Toledo, it seemed like his name was coming up a ton. Cooled off, but I think part of that is it has gotten harder to sustain in the MAC, where it's always been hard to be a big-time winner there. The cradle of coaches, not as welcoming as it has been in the past. But I'm going to go A- on this one. I like this hire for them. If you're UConn and you're getting – he didn't forget how to coach. You know, again, this goes back to the Jimmys and Joes thing. I think people want to always overreact to, hey, like this coach – is not giving us the results we want. These guys don't forget how to coach. A lot of this does come down to, can you have a roster that is capable of doing the things that you need to do? And you know, it's been tough to do that at Toledo, and it's not going to be a whole lot easier at UConn. But certainly UConn has upped their lot in life very quickly under Jim Moore, and they'd like to keep that going. I think Candle's a guy that can do that. It's
tough to say, like, what are fair expectations at UConn? You know, and like,
I don't know. That's a good question.
Talking to people around there, it's like, you don't have a conference to play for. You don't have like really hardcore rivals to play against. You don't have many measuring sticks. Guys don't win conference player of the week honors, you know, like it's really like a purgatory existence, but they didn't want to go to Conference USA as a football only member. They're kind of hanging around. Like, I don't think there's that much appetite for basketball and everybody else to go join the ACC and go there. Like, the Big 12 thought about it. Brett Yormark wanted to do it, but nobody else in the Big 12 really did. So it's kind of a weird spot, but Moore did a good job, and we'll get to him. UAB promotes Alex Mortensen. This was one of the strangest moves in the carousel. So they fired Trent Dilfer, who didn't do a good job in 2+ years. We got a mailbag question here I wanted to get to. Sent a while back, but from Nathan McCants. This is actually over the holidays he sent this. But he says, hey guys, hope holidays are treating you well. Bunch Formation Podcast, one of the must-listen podcasts all season. I wanted to know if both of you could share what you individually or collectively know about what went down with the UAB coaching search. I've heard one or both of you mention the UAB search was a mess in passing. Please share whatever shareable source information either of you may have to illustrate this. Blazer fans have read and Grapevine heard a lot, to where if you surveyed them, I think most are in the camp of genuinely trying to rally around Alex Mortensen as a coach, while also very much wanting athletic director Mark Ingram gone. Thanks for recreating the podcast. Here's to a great 2026. So a number of coaches pulled out of this search. Drew Cronick was among them, the offensive coordinator at Navy, former head coach at Mercer, because there was a very big divide between what Ingram wanted and what the school officials wanted. Steve Englehart, the head coach of Presbyterian, was a finalist. Ryan Beard was a finalist, guy who ended up at Coastal. And ultimately, from what I could understand, is that the school won out. And the president and trustees and various people getting involved, they wanted Mortensen. They got their guy. I talked to people in the search who thought it was one of the strangest, most unprofessional searches that they had been a part of. And it wasn't really on the AD, according to those people. It was really that the AD and the school were running different parts of the searches. And that's kind of what happened in North Carolina with Belichick. And sometimes that happens. And so, you know, you could say, should Mark Ingram be allowed to hire another coach? He's the guy who hired Trent Dilfer. He's the guy who got sweet-talked into hiring him from a high school job with no college experience, and that did not go well. So you could make that case, but if you're going to have the AD, he should probably be the guy who makes the hire. That is my understanding of what happened.
I'm going to go C+ here. I think Alex Mortensen can be a good coach. I think he has a ton of upside, very well regarded. But I think UAB is a better job than this. To promote from within on a disastrous staff, it just, that's a tough sell to get people excited, to sell a new and bright future to anyone, players, fans, boosters, donors. And UAB has a lot of pride, and surprising to see them land there.
I give this a D, by the way. And one thing about that job, it doesn't have the resources that maybe people think it does since it moved into the American. Because you're now competing with USF and Memphis and Tulane and a lot of programs that just have a lot more money. So it is a tougher job. Like Bill Clark was winning in Conference USA, and it's not Conference USA anymore. But
yeah, I mean, people complained about the Dilfer thing. But $3 million to fire a coach is a lot of money at UAB. And if that buyout had been a little bit lower, I think that might have been a different outcome after the 24 season.
Do you know where Dilfer is right now, by the way?
Did he go back to Lipscomb?
He went back to Lipscomb Academy, where he was the high school head coach. He is back there once again.
Because Jason Witten was there or something, right? Or they had some other.
Yeah.
They had some other famous football player there, and then he left for another job, and so they had an opening. It was, kind of serendipitous.
Mortensen, by the way, was the interim head coach, when they beat Memphis on the road, which totally upended Memphis' season in the American race and the playoff race. So he did do that. But I think he went 2-4 in his time as interim head coach. I'm giving that a D. Penn State. Now we're getting into the big ones because we're going in reverse. I'm realizing in hindsight we probably should have gone in the opposite order, but saving the big ones for last. Penn State, after a long and strangely winding search, ended up on Iowa State head coach Matt Campbell, who it wasn't Matt Rule. I don't think they were really that far along with Matt Rule. I think both sides kind of thought it wasn't good timing. Kurt Cignetti right away didn't want to do it. Almost had Kalani Sitake. Crumble Cookie and others come in and are able to convince Kalani Sitake to stay at BYU. And Penn State goes back to Matt Campbell, he probably should have been a top target from the beginning, but he wasn't for a couple of strange reasons. Some people may have kind of talked down on Campbell, and various things were a bit strange. But they ultimately ended up in a good place. This is the greatest coach in modern history for Iowa State. He twice led them to first place in the Big 12. They hadn't won a conference since 1912. He beat Oklahoma a couple of times, beat Texas a couple of times. He was 4-6 against top 10 teams at Iowa State. So, what was the problem with James Franklin? Couldn't win the big games. What does Matt Campbell do? He wins quite a few big games. The flip side, the question is, how does he handle the pressure? How does he handle the spotlight? With the expectations, and supposed to sign top 10 recruiting classes. You're supposed to finish in the top 5. Can he handle that? I'm giving this an A-.
Yeah, I'm going to go with an A, process notwithstanding. Frustrating search for the Penn State folks, but ultimately I think one of Matt Campbell's the greatest testament to what he did at Iowa State was make people forget how hard it is to win at Iowa State.
Yes.
And I think you're going to find that out pretty quickly. How does that translate to Penn State? I mean, these are very, very different jobs. It's hard to say, but I think the upside is definitely there. The experience is there. You're not learning on the job. It doesn't feel like a risky hire. I could see a world in which Matt Campbell maybe doesn't win as much as James Franklin or win as big as people think. But the idea that it could be 3-9, 4-8 is just not, I don't think that's possible.
But you have to do better than James Franklin though, right?
Well, sure, you have to. My point is, it's not like this is a home run, slam dunk, whatever you want to say. It's not like that. Replacing James Franklin is tough. But my point is, I don't think this is going to be a disaster. I think he can do better than James Franklin. I don't know that I'd bet on him to do better, but it's definitely possible. So, by the way, Chris, where do you stand on crumble cookies?
I mean, they're not a regular part of my consumption. My wife's not into it. It's not really part of what I do. I saw at the store the other day, they partnered with Dove, I think, for some soap, cookie soap. I don't know.
They're a little overrated, but when they hit, The rotating menu thing keeps them popping on social. The cornbread cookie, elite anyway.
Yeah, it's just something that my family.
So have you never had one, Chris? Is that what we're talking about here?
I have, but it's not. I couldn't tell you what's on the menu. I couldn't tell you.
Well, they
generally what
rotate it
is.
every week. That's like their thing. They have some staples, and they have like 6 new cookies every week. So you got to follow them on social, Chris.
All right. Kansas State hires Collin Klein after Chris Kleiman decided to retire. Klein, the former Heisman finalist quarterback with them. He had been the OC there, then went to Texas A&M to be the offensive coordinator. He was in the mix for a couple of Power 4 head jobs in the cycle, but when Kleiman decides to retire, Kansas State's making sure they bring the hometown kid home.
Mm-hmm.
Only 2 head coaches have won big in Kansas State's history. That's Bill Snyder and Chris Kleiman. And Collin Klein played or coached under both of them. He is, again, the perfect guy for that job, and he knows what it takes to win. And he did a good job as an OC at Kansas State when they beat TCU that year. TCU
Very
won the
good
championship,
both times.
22. He went to Texas A&M, did a very good job as the OC there. Turned Marcel Reed into a Heisman contender, 2 really good seasons there. And he brings it back home. It's hard to ask for much more. Like, I'm giving this an A on fit. Like, there's no guarantee any head coach is going to work out.
Yeah.
But there's nothing more you could ask for in what you're getting in Collin Klein.
I'll go B+ here. I talked to Gene Taylor quite a bit about this hire in Vegas in December. And, like, he knows it's a risk. Everybody knows it's a risk. Like, Collin's pretty young, and he's probably a little green for this job. But if you wait 5 years, you might not get a chance to.
No, he was
home.
he was going to get a head coaching job this year or next year. He was in the mix at UCLA, at Oklahoma State, at Arkansas. I believe as well. Like,
so you got to take your shot. You got to bring it back now. You got to do it. There is risk involved. Trying to learn how to be a head coach in a place like the Big 12 where there are so many good head coaches is tough. It's going to be hard, but the fit is too good. The desire is there. A place that he knows, a place that he loves. I think obviously the upside is enormous. And what you've seen from him as a football coach is really good. But that's what he's going to have to grow into is, yes, he can coach football. He can call plays well. He can help develop quarterbacks. But some of the administrative stuff, the the 30,000 foot view stuff of running a program, every first-time head coach has to figure that stuff out. Game management, all those things. But he's going to have to learn with some pretty bright lights around him, and that's going to be tough. So, the risk is there, but I think the upside is there too.
A coach told me once, you don't take your alma mater as your first head coaching job because there's too much. You're all too close to the situation. That's what somebody
There's
told me.
A lot of that going around these days. It's working out pretty well in Tempe right now.
But again, he's at a place that's going to have to compete with Texas Tech and BYU and a lot of high resource teams in that league. Cal hired Tosh Lupoi, the defense coordinator at Oregon. They fired Justin Wilcox after a lengthy tenure there. Even made a bowl game this year. But they bring in Tosh Lupoi, who kept Songapula, the great freshman quarterback, the best possible thing you could do. This is a guy who played at Cal. He's from there. Really good recruiter. I'm on the fence of like B+ A- here. I'm going to bump it up to A- because he kept JKS. Again, very difficult job, but that's a good get for them.
It's tough. I'm going to go B- here just because. So his calling card forever, when he was at Alabama for a long time, was he was an ace recruiter for them. And that job is a lot less important now because the money aspect of things and what can we offer trumps, we've got this guy that is really good at bringing guys in. And, I'm sure everything at Alabama was above board while he was there. It's not like there were any, NCAA run-ins that maybe
Alabama Jones
pushed him into the NFL for a while. I think the upside is there, but like going from Oregon, where you have a ton of advantages, to Cal, where you're on the Pacific Coast in the ACC at an academic school without a ton of history of success, have been kind of blah for a while. You have the JKS lifeline, obviously, that gives you a ton of juice to start with. And then obviously, it's really important that you keep him, and there's something to be said for doing that and winning them over. But there's also something to be said for, like, he'd been pretty steadfast from the start, I'm going to stay at Cal. I'm going to stay at Cal. He said it before, after Justin Wilcox was fired. So it's like, keeping the stiff arming the other bigger programs with big checks away, was helpful. I'm sure he's going to be paid handsomely at Cal as well. But he's got a lot to prove, I think, and doing it at a place that's not Alabama, that's not Oregon. It's just a different challenge. So I'm going to go B-.
We're going a bit long, so we'll probably speed through some of these a bit more. We have quite a few to go. I didn't organize this episode well. My fault on that. James Madison hires Billy Napier after going with the up-and-coming guy several times, Mike Houston, Bob Chesney, Kurt Signetti. They instead hire the guy who just got fired at Florida to replace Bob Chesney. Now, Napier it's his third head coaching job. He went 33-5 at Louisiana, 24-3 against the Sun Belt competition. From talking to the JMU people, they think they're ready to elevate now and not just be the plucky thing. So let's get the guy who's coached at an SEC school, and we want to kind of run ourselves like that. I'm surprised. I was surprised by this hire for multiple reasons. I'm going to give it a B-. Now, JMU, their last 3 head coaches all won at least 70% of their games. It's a program that hasn't had a losing season in forever. Like, the ceiling is still very high here, but the group of 6 now is very different than when Billy Napier was at Louisiana. And I'm not sure about this.
These sort of retreads are all over the map in terms of whether they work or not. This direct retread going back to the Sun Belt, but at a place that is well resourced, that you're going to be able to have a good roster, I think puts them in good position. So I'm going to go B+ here. I'm not as skeptical as you are. I think changing a lot of what he did at Florida compared to Louisiana was confounding in a lot of ways. And I wonder if you learn from that and you go back to some other types of stuff at James Madison. So I'm going to go B+ here for him.
I think the problem at Florida is that he didn't adapt quickly enough. He brought too many guys with him from Louisiana who weren't SEC ready. So he's getting a lot of the band back together. He says he won't call plays. We'll see. USF hires Brian Hartline, who is one of maybe the best recruiter in the country at Ohio State. Got Jeremiah Smith, Brandon Innes, Carnell Tate up there. And South Florida is probably the highest paying group of 6 job in terms of roster budget. Like, they're trying to do full rev share there. The school is like, they're working through that. They got the on-campus stadium going up there, going all in on finding football success. And you get a guy like Brian Hartline who knows Florida, who knows guys there. However, Brian Hartline has only ever coached at Ohio State. He's never coached at another type of place. How is he going to handle the head coaching job and the stuff that comes with that? He was kind of in and out of the OC job, and Ryan Day kept coming in and kind of taking over play calling or giving it to Chip Kelly or stuff like that. So how will he handle that bigger role and stuff like that? But this job is going to be about acquiring talent, and he's going to do a good job of acquiring it. I'm going to go B+.
Yeah, I have a lot of questions about him, in the game management stuff, in the 30,000-foot head coach stuff. But like you said, in the talent acquisition game at a place like South Florida, I think he can put together a roster that gives him a high enough floor to be successful. Is he going to parlay that into, the Auburn head coaching job? I don't know. But I think he can have some success there.
North Texas hires Neal Brown. North Texas lost Eric Morris, their head coach, to Oklahoma State. They bring in the Neal Brown, who spent the year at Texas in a job on the staff, former head coach at Troy, did a really good job there. Former coach at West Virginia, who did like an okay job there. I'm going to give this a B. I see it. I understand it. I don't know if the upside is very high here, but I think the floor is pretty high as well. North Texas has a lot of what you want. Great facilities, great location just outside of Dallas, but their roster spending is not at the level of the top teams in the conference. And they're going to have to kind of find ways to pick that up. But they've got rare momentum here at UNT. Like, they don't often have a lot of good stuff going, and they do, and it's going to be on Neal Brown to keep it going. I say a B.
Yeah, the people that I talk to, seem to be really excited about this hire. I didn't quite see it. I'm a little bit like you. I think the floor is really high. I think West Virginia I always say the winds of change have blown against a lot of programs in college football. I think West Virginia really high on that list. I might put them in the top 5, top 10 for just college football changing and making it harder for you to sustain success. And it's hard for the fan bases to catch up, and sometimes the expectations are out of whack with what is possible there. So at North Texas, I don't think that's going to be the case. I think if anything, things are building there. So I don't know that I see the upside, but I do think he can have some success there and maybe prove some people wrong. And a guy with a lot of head coaching experience as well that can help you.
Kentucky hires Will Stein, the Oregon offensive coordinator. This comes after Kentucky fired Mark Stoops, who was probably the second best coach in the program's history there after Bear Bryant. Paid a pretty hefty buyout to do it. Will Stein, former Louisville player, Louisville native, grew up a big Kentucky fan. His dad was a player there. That's the connection. This was another guy who was going to get a head coaching job soon, and he had been very picky. Like, he was not just taking any jobs that came his way. So for Kentucky to get him, very, very difficult job in the SEC, but you get kind of a local guy to come back. I like that. We had Sam Kahn on the show last week. He loved what Will Stein and them did in the portal. Now, we'll see how he handles being in the SEC. We'll see how he handles being a head coach. There's a lot of transition here. Again, first-time job, and you kind of got to deal with the basketball stuff and the money and figure out what that is. I think the upside is very difficult here because the job is so hard. But for Kentucky to get him, I think it was a big get. I give it a B+.
Yeah, I am also going to stick with the B+ there. Talent acquisition. Been unbelievably impressed with what he's been able to do at Kentucky and organize that. And, they almost landed Sam Leavitt. We did talk about this with Sam. You hit on that. But that's the biggest part of all this. And I think these days, we talked about the Tosh Lupoi part of it. These days, it's not as much do you have a head coach who can sweet talk the 18-year-old kid and his mom. Now it's like, can you sweet talk the donors? Can you get the donors to open up their pockets? I think that's a very different skill set. I think there's a lot of crossover, but you got to be able to prove that. And from what I've seen early on in the Will Stein era, and some of that's excitement and having a guy that has obviously Kentucky ties coming home, I've liked what I've seen. So I'm going to go B+, almost pushing an A-. Just maybe not upon hearing the hire. It was kind of felt a little risky. A guy that obviously has had a lot of hype for, jobs in recent years. But what I've seen from him since he got the job makes me almost want to go A-.
UCLA hires Bob Chesney from James Madison after they fired Deshaun Foster. Chesney very much in the Cignetti, pathway of a guy who's won at every level that he's been at, including succeeding Curt Cignetti at James Madison. He's had one losing season across 16 years as a head coach. He's won at D3, D2, FCS. On paper, everything you like there. I'm surprised he ended up here. I'd heard pretty early on that the people in charge of that UCLA search had targeted him and really liked him, and then they go on to make the playoff and all that stuff. But this is an East Coast guy, a Northeast guy. He's never coached outside the Eastern time zone. Now
he has the LA look to him, though. Give him that.
He does have a great look. Yeah. This is a very big culture change. You have to have Southern California as the lifeblood of your program and the recruiting and getting to know all the people there. So UCLA search was very much not stuck on California guys. They talked to a lot of guys who are not from California. So they're kind of going a bit nationally, but you found a guy with a proven track record. I thought, no offense to UCLA, I thought Chesney could have got an even better job.
I did too.
So for UCLA to get him, I think was big. I'm going to give it a B+, only because the lack of regional connection has me a little concerned.
No, I think in the NIL era, that doesn't matter as much. I'm going to go A here.
But by the way, UCLA does not have very much money. That's the whole problem. Chip Kelly didn't like it. Now, maybe maybe Chesney, to what you just said, can get the donors behind it. The donors were very much involved in this search, and so maybe that helps out.
I think a lot of this is UCLA for a long time has just not felt like a serious program. Chip Kelly was not an aggressive recruiter, was an extremely late adopter with NIL, didn't seem to take it seriously. And then the Deshaun Foster thing, Obviously that how they got to that road with not firing Chip Kelly, and then he knows it's coming, so he leaves, and then you sort of have to push it onto Sean Foster, who wasn't ready. They just haven't been serious for a long time. I think Bob Chesney can bring some more seriousness to the program, a plan to the program, and I think he can unlock some things. Like why UCLA has not been more successful over its history. It's not on the Texas A&M level of curious, but it's pretty high up there. And I think you can have some success there. And I think Bob Chesney is somebody who can take UCLA closer to its ceiling, whatever that is. It's hard to say exactly what that is. I think it should be higher than what we've seen on the field. But, history is an indicator. But as Indiana showed us, in the modern era of college football, it's not everything. And I like what they've done bringing Chesney over. So I'm going A.
Michigan State hires Pat Fitzgerald. All season, you didn't know if they were really going to fire Jonathan Smith, who had a really big buyout, around like $36 million. They weren't extending him. They weren't saying he was coming back. It was very strange. And then, boom, he's fired. Boom, they've hired Pat Fitzgerald. So it's pretty clear that they had that planned. A lot to unpack here. Fitzgerald did win a lot of games at Northwestern, at a program with almost no winning history. He knows the Midwest. And perhaps most importantly, the donors were very behind this hire. The donors were never behind Jonathan Smith. Some of them were still spurned by the firing of Mel Tucker. They didn't think he should have been fired. They were the ones driving. They were the ones driving the
interesting take. Okay.
They were the ones driving the contract extension he got, and so it's not a surprise that last year there's an AD change. You bring in a guy in Jay Batt who's very good with donors and very good at raising money. And they're behind this hire. And they announced shortly after they hired him, NBC announced like $300 million donation or something from the Acrisure guy who's like from the Lansing area. So there seems to be money going behind this. But also, he didn't do a good job at the end of his tenure there at Northwestern. Like even before the hazing allegations, they won 1-11 or 2-10 or something like that in his last season. He won 4 games in his last 2 seasons, and he didn't adapt to the NIL era well. Now, is that just Northwestern? I don't know. I do know that David Braun came in and instantly made that program a lot better. And
that was the biggest red flag for me on the Fitzgerald thing. It's like everybody's expecting Northwestern to be a smoking crater after Fitzgerald gets fired. Like there was legitimately, Chris, I don't know if you remember that offseason, but going into that, people were like, is this Northwestern team going to be the worst P4 team we've ever seen?
Because they were like 1-11 the year prior and then fired the coach on the eve of the season.
Yes. I don't really get the Pat Fitzgerald thing. Like, I think in the coaching community, you will be hard pressed to find somebody with more respect than Pat Fitzgerald. I could see this working out, but I'm going to go D here. I don't get it for a lot of the reasons that you hit on. It's unimaginative. It's certainly risky. There's going to be a sect of your fan base who just doesn't want him to be there. That's hard to do when you come in there. I think too, it's a results business. You can talk about respect. You can talk about track record and pedigree and history, but it's a results business, and the results were not there. And I think the upside for this is really missing for me.
I'm going to give it a B- though. He has energized fans. He has been saying and doing all the right things. Portal class didn't turn out great, but that's also the difficulty when you hire a guy who hasn't been in coaching for the last few years. He doesn't have players to bring with him. So it's going to be a bit of a roster reset here. You could also say, look, he didn't do well at Northwestern because they didn't have NIL. And if you give him the resources, he's going to do well. And that was kind of the pitch that he was making to, he interviewed for Penn State. He interviewed for a lot of jobs. And I think MSU's just hoping to raise the floor, I guess. Jonathan Smith almost went winless in Big Ten play this year, and they just want to get back to respectable. And maybe Fitzgerald does it for a few years and everybody moves on. We will see. LSU hires Lane Kiffin. You may have heard about this one. You may have heard about this one. He was the coach at Ole Miss, wanted to coach the playoff, and Ole Miss correctly said, no, what are you talking about? And he dragged it out, made a whole big show of it, takes the LSU job. I'm giving this an A. He was the best coach available, this is the best job available, maybe the best job in the sport given the natural resources. You give Lane Kiffin a lot of resources at a school like that, he's going to do a good job. He just pulled in the number 1 transfer portal. He's got Sam Levitt. He kept some good players. How is this going to end? Probably bad, like it always does. But is he going to win a lot of games along the way? I think he is. I'm giving it an A.
I'm also giving it an A. I think there is a potential for this to be disastrous. I don't think it will be. I think this can work out. But I think the potential is there. I think people turned on Brian Kelly really quickly for a lot of reasons. I mean, I remember going to that Ole Miss game in 24. They lose it in overtime, and people want to run. I mean, that was halfway through year 2, if I recall. People want to run Brian Kelly out of there then. And it's like, man, tough crowd, but it's LSU. The expectation is so high that if you lose your people, it's hard to get them back. But I will say, we've talked about a lot of jobs here. Chris, and I was talking to some ADs in Vegas when I was out there, and we were just talking about like the number of programs that are like thrilled that could say, hey, we got a home run coach. Everybody's excited for this guy. Everybody wanted this guy. It's a pretty short list, right? It might be just Florida and LSU. That might be the only ones that are like over the moon. And so there's something to be said for that. I think that can get you off on the right foot. We've seen that translate, as you mentioned, to the portal. So I think there can be some really big things here. Again, say what you will about the Brian Kelly experience, but 3 out of 4 of your last head coaches winning national titles is still not a bad percentage.
Here's my concern about Lane Kiffin. His record against top 5 teams is 3-11. Now, you could say most of those times he didn't have the more talented team, and he probably will this time around. But he also isn't a guy who won a bunch of conference championships. I think he may have won 1 at USC, and then he won some at FAU. But like he wasn't in the SEC championship game at Ole Miss. And then without him, they go all the way to the semifinal and almost to the championship. And that is the bar now for Lane Kiffin. Like he chose to leave a job where you could have won the national championship with this year's team. That's why what he did was so unprecedented. And you have to win a national championship at LSU. Like he has to do that. That is the bar he is going to be held at because that's what he left and that's what they expect. Brian Kelly did not do a bad job at LSU. He just didn't do a good enough job, and he didn't have the relationships there for the people to want to keep him. And if there's one thing we know about Lane Kiffin, he's great with relationships, right? Dave, you're muted.
Yeah, definitely. Every time everybody that's hired him has loved the fact that they hired him and speaks highly of the experience, definitely.
Ole Miss, in place of Lane Kiffin, promoted Pete Golding. I'm grading this a B. You had to do it. You had to keep the guy from within for a team that was going to the playoff and could make a run and did make a run and nearly reached the national championship. Now he's got to reboot a bunch of things, but he's got Trinidad Chambliss coming back and he's got Quan Lacey coming back. So it's a pretty good place to be, but he did lose much of the staff, especially the offensive staff that went with him. We'll see if this momentum can continue. But it's not like Pete Golding was like gonna get a head coaching job somewhere else, So I'm gonna give it a B, but it could. I can see the upside here, but I can also see it going very bad.
I can see that. I'm gonna go B- here for a couple reasons. One, they violated my golden rule of coaching, which is
right. Well,
we don't have divisions anymore, but if nobody else in your division would hire that guy as a head coach, do not hire that guy as a head coach. So you had to do that. But again, obviously, there's reasons for that, the situation that they were in. So I almost give them a pass on that, but it is what it is. And then I just, the same stuff we were talking about with Collin Klein, the 30,000-foot view of coaching, running a head, running a program, all the head coaching responsibilities. You're going to have to learn that on the go. And then, like, with the portal stuff, the Clemson tampering thing, like, I think he's made a lot of enemies in a very short amount of time, and that stuff can catch up to you. So we'll see. I do think the upside is there. I think he's a guy that people can rally around. Can that sustain you for 5 years? We'll find out.
Florida hires Jon Sumrall, who almost took the Auburn job, who was in for quite a few things. Florida wanted Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin didn't choose them. They pivoted. hired Jon Sumrall. He has been a head coach for 4 years. He has reached the conference championship game all 4 times. He's won 3 of those. He took Tulane to the playoff. And this is a guy who has just won, and he's won at multiple jobs. And he was destined to be an SEC head coach. Everybody knew it. He's from Alabama. He went to Kentucky. I, again, spent some time with him last season. Really fascinating guy. And when they hired him, a lot of Florida people I know were not happy because 2 reasons. 1, it wasn't Lane Kiffin, and they just weren't going to be happy if you didn't hire Lane Kiffin. And 2, you hired a G5 coach from Louisiana. Didn't you just do that with Billy Napier and it went very poorly? They are completely different coaches. They are completely different situations. Coaching at Tulane and University of Louisiana, very different situations. And I think since then, Florida fans have really come around on him. He was able to keep Jaden Ball. He won the press conference. People liked what he had to say. He's a bit self-deprecating. He's very aware of things. He's not aloof. He knows what people are thinking and saying, and he comes at it head on all the time. I'll link my story in the show notes. Fascinating mind. Like I got Dan Lanning vibes from him when I spent time around him in terms of a young guy who sees the big picture and really, really, really focuses in on culture. He's very good with roster management and logistics. That's what you need in the SEC, and he's got SEC experience. He's coached there as an assistant. I'm going to give it an A- because he hasn't been an SEC head coach, and I don't want to put him on the same level as Lane Kiffin, but I think there's a good chance he does a very good job here.
I'm also going to go A-, pushing A. The American's not the Sun Belt. And doing it in the modern era, going from Tulane, where like you're up there, maybe you're not the best, but you're up there. That's pretty much Florida in the SEC. Very similar challenge. And I got to tell you, like, I don't think he was looking to get rid of DJ Lagway, but from what we saw, the more I watched DJ Lagway, the less I liked. Obviously, all the tools are there. Obviously, it jumps off the screen, but the taking care of the ball, some of the decision making, some of the accuracy, had a lot of questions. Is this a guy that can like carry a program? We haven't seen a ton of Aaron Philo, but like I think that kind of fits the Sumrall vibe a little bit more.
It better. I mean, it has to because of what they decided.
I mean, sort of. It's not like they ran him out of town. I think it was just like they weren't going to beg him to stay. And so ultimately, like Lagway, also there's something to be said for like just being saddled with expectations as a 5-star quarterback. Like if you're not just a deity, people are gonna be frustrated, and Philo can come in and be a little bit more like Haynes King, and we backed up where it's like just a guy that like people kind of gravitate toward.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna go A-. I think the upside is there. I think the floor is high. I think the ceiling is high. He feels like the next guy, and like that doesn't always work out, but sometimes they do. Like for every Tom Herman, there's a Kirby Smart,
Auburn hires Alex Golesh. They fired Hugh Freeze. They hired Golesh from USF. Golesh, former Tennessee assistant. He's got SEC experience there. And he took over a 1-11 South Florida team and went to 3 bowl games in 3 years, including a 9-3 start to this season with Byron Brown at quarterback. I give this a B+. Good coach, turned around USF, did what you needed to do there. Lost some games you probably shouldn't have and had some late game questions. I think the Memphis game was one of those. So there were some this and there, not sure, but I still think he's a good coach, direct guy, but not on the Sumrall level to me. B+.
I'm going to go A- here. I think with Golesh, I think he's going to be really good at the 30,000-foot head coaching stuff, managing, delegating, all of those things, learning at USF, making decisions. I think he can be really good there. I think the offense will be fun, will be a fit. Got to amass talent. And I think just some consistency. Like Auburn has just been all over the place. A lot of up and down, but a lot more down than up. And just a different kind of guy. I think for a lot of people, like the Hugh Freeze experience just felt a little bit grody. And I think there's something to be said for not having to deal with that. So a fresh start, Probably fair expectations, and to be better than Brian Harsin, to be better than Hugh Freeze, reasonable to me. So I'm gonna
you got to
A
get the
minus.
offense right. The offense has been
Yeah.
dreadful for years. You got to fix that, and that's what he's done. So we will see.
Mm-hmm.
Colorado State hires Jim Mora from UConn. They fired Jay Norvell there. This was, I think, a really good hire for a few reasons. I was surprised Mora didn't get a bigger job. Like, he talked to Oregon State, he talked to Stanford, but he's got NFL experience. He took over a 1-11 UConn program we thought maybe should drop to FCS, and he won 9 games twice. And his UCLA tenure, in hindsight, looks better. It's probably better than what Chip Kelly did. And Colorado State's a program for people who have always thought should be able to do more. Got good facilities, got good resources, moving up to the new Pac-12. B+, I almost gave this more, but this is more has done more with less, and this is a place that probably won't be a less.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go A- here. Like, he's one that I really got wrong the last time he was hired. Like, when he went to UConn, it was kind of like,
it's a weird retread, and it's a weird retread.
Like, all
but
right, well, I mean, my expectations for UConn were on the floor, and all of a sudden, like, they were cooking a little bit. So, we'll see what UConn can do to reboot. We hit on Campbell earlier, but just uniquely maybe well suited to do this. I think Colorado State is a much better job than people think. So I'm going to go A- there.
Oklahoma State hires Eric Morris. Natural fit for all the reasons I laid out on the portal episode we did last week. He's deep ties to Texas, offensive background, develops quarterbacks, guys like Cam Ward, John Mateer, Drew Mestamaker. And he brought all the really good players with him, Wyatt Young, Caleb Hawkins. But he also brought Skylar Cassidy, the defensive coordinator who really fixed things. Because Morris always had a good offense when he was at North Texas, but the defense was terrible. And he brought in Skylar Cassidy, who's a DC at Sam Houston, did a good job there. And he did a good job at North Texas. So you bring all of that up north to Stillwater. Like, I'm giving this an A in terms of fit. Like, maybe not year one, but it could get in the Big 12 mix
maybe
pretty quickly. And the resources, like Gundy lamented the resources, but I think people around there say the donors were holding out because they were tired of Gundy, and maybe Morris is able to get them to tap into more of it.
I'm going to go A here. Gundy, really good coach for a long time in the NIL era. Some of these coaches just had to be dragged kicking and screaming into it. And if you're not going to embrace it, it's going to eat you alive. And Oklahoma State, for most of the last few seasons, has not been a serious program. If you just don't want to pay players, then somebody else is going to, if you get good players. And your program, you looked around at Oklahoma State, you were like, they're completely devoid of talent. They've just been not a serious program. And I think Eric Morris can get them back into that. I think it's been so bad that I think he's going to get people fired up immediately. But then those expectations come back where it's like Oklahoma State feels like they should be contending for winning the Big 12, especially without Texas and Oklahoma, almost every year. Is that possible when Texas Tech is doing what Texas Tech is going to be doing moving forward? But BYU has pretty deep pockets and really good tradition, and it's a tough place to play like Stillwater. So I think immediately I think this looks like an A. I do wonder if you're only winning 9 and 10 games, if Oklahoma State fans will put up with that, but over time. But we'll see. We'll see, Chris. I think it's different when you're not the favorite son of the university. So I'm going to go A here. I think he fixes a lot of this stuff almost immediately, where they're at least respectable and serious about talent acquisition and trying to win some ball games in Stillwater.
Arkansas hires Ryan Silverfield. I'm going to give this a C+. There are 2 ways to look at Ryan Silverfield's run at Memphis. He went 29-9 over the last 3 years, never had a losing season in 6 years. He won his last 4 games against Power 4 opponents. He went 6-1 against Jon Sumrall, Alex Golesh, and Eric Morris. It's pretty good. On the other hand, he never reached the conference championship game. He lost games to UAB, to East Carolina, to UTSA, things that cost them a spot in the conference championship game. He lost games that you shouldn't lose. And he'll have to show he can recruit at an SEC level. Memphis is one of the best resource jobs in the G5. Arkansas is not. in the SEC. Now, I think Silverfield's done a good job so far. He got some important in-state guys when he got the job. I think he's done better than people expected since he got it. But you got a lot of money going to the basketball team there, and there's still questions about the commitment, which is not his fault. But for a guy who never even reached the American Conference Championship game, I guess Golesh didn't either. But he took over for Norvell, took over a good program, kept it good, never made it great. C plus, B minus, I'm right on the fence there.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I'm going to probably go C plus, B minus as well. It is an odd fit for a lot of the reasons that you put in, and I think going from, one of, if not the best G5 job to, we don't need to rank the SEC jobs, but I think Arkansas is probably in the double digits if you're ranking the SEC. It's tough. And so that lack of high-level success is a huge question mark. But also, some of this is just driven by the market. And considering all the other things in the market, it's about as good as you can probably expect from Arkansas at this point. So I'll go B minus, C plus as well. But it's just a different challenge, and maybe he rises to it.
They were also, Collin Klein was in the mix here, so was Kane Womack, who has ties to Arkansas, the Alabama defensive coordinator, but they went with the sitting head coach, so we will see. Stanford hires Tavita Pritchard. I'm giving this a C or C minus. I'd probably say a C. You got somebody who knows Stanford. He was there from 06 to 2022 as a quarterback and then as an assistant coach. He goes to the NFL, does a good job with Jaden Daniels as the Washington Commanders quarterback coach, and now he comes back to work for Andrew Luck, who used to be his teammate. It's a uniquely difficult job. He knows the landscape, but he's been out of college football for the last 3 years as well. So how does he handle the new college football at a very difficult spot? Stanford hurt as much as anybody else by the changes to conference and all that stuff. It's another one of those, like you say, he wasn't going to land a head coaching job probably. And he does here. And they got a $50 million donation, Andrew Luck did, so they're getting some money in, but Stanford's doubling down on Stanford, and I don't know if that's going to work.
Yeah, a weird hire. It was one of those where it's how many people did y'all talk to? It's I was a little surprised he wanted to come back and take it.
It was a quiet search, but Jim Mora was one of the people they talked to.
Yeah. So I'm going to go probably D here. Maybe this works out, but if I'm a Stanford fan, I don't know that it gets me that excited.
Oregon State hired Jamarcus Shepard, a assistant coach at Alabama. Surprised that Oregon State's going with a first-time head coach because Jonathan Smith left as the Pac-12 fell apart, and they promoted the defense coordinator, Trent Bray. He gets fired, and the sense I got around there was that they felt like they made a mistake hiring a first-time head coach. They wanted somebody who knows what the job is. And then you hired somebody who doesn't have that experience. Shepard has worked at Washington. He's worked at Washington State. He's developed some really good receivers. But this was surprising. I'm going to give it a C. He's a pretty good recruiter. Maybe there's some upside, but I don't know. It doesn't seem to fit.
Yeah, I'll go C plus here. Chris, it's gonna be hard to bring people into Oregon State at this point. It's just a different. I do like the energy.
Neither Oregon State or Washington State went and got Brent Vegan, the coach at Montana State, or any of those high-level FCS guys, and I'm surprised that they didn't. Really, both of them.
I think it's good to get an energy guy, and I think the thing that probably gets me excited is I don't think he's gonna have the type of attitude where it's you're constantly talking about, this isn't what Oregon State was 5 or 6 years ago because, the winds have changed, as they say. I think it's just hey, we're going to come in here. We're going to talk about what we can do at Oregon State. We'll see kind of what the new Pac-12 looks like, but we want to win that league, get to the playoff, all those things. So we'll see. But yeah, uninspiring.
Virginia Tech hires James Franklin. He, the former Penn State head coach, who was fired during the season, and everybody immediately said, he'd be a really good fit for Virginia Tech. And he waited a bit. He was curious about some SEC jobs if they were going to open. Virginia Tech eventually said, dude, you got to make your decision or we are moving on to other candidates. He decided to take the Virginia Tech job. He's never missed a bowl game in 15 years as a head coach at Vanderbilt or Penn State outside of the weird 2020. He turned Penn State into a top 10 program. It was not that when he got there. Like, Bill O'Brien saved it from completely falling apart after Sandusky, but Franklin comes in and it's like a not great program, and he turned it into a very, very good one. He just couldn't get over the hump and win the big games. Virginia Tech isn't asking you to win all the big games right now. They're just asking you to be a respectable outfit that's like winning 8-9 games to start, get back in contention, make Virginia Tech proud. He's very familiar with the area. He's recruited that place for a long time. He took a lot of good Virginia kids out of that state and to Penn State. So I'm going to go with an A- here. I was very close to an A. I think it's a really, really good fit, but I'm going to go A-.
I'm going to go A+. I like that you're getting, I think it's one of my favorite hires of this cycle. I think you're getting a coach with a ton to prove, and I think you raised your floor. Chris, how many times do you think Virginia Tech has won 10 games since 2011?
It's been, I wrote a story about this with Grace Rayner once, I think 2014. Is that right?
Justin Fuente's first year, one time.
We'll link to that story in the show notes, by the way. We went into basically what went wrong at Virginia Tech and how they're trying to bring it back.
I think Franklin can raise the floor on this program a lot. And it's been messy. You know, Fuente, they had guys leaving all the time. Pry just never really got it going. And I think I talked to Whit Babcock a little bit, their AD, about the like weird dynamic where Brent Pry is sticking around. And like, I think that's
Brent Pry. By the way, if Brent Pry, the fired head coach, is still there as the defensive coordinator for Kent. I've never seen
Costanza situation. Not a Costanza situation. Franklin hired him, brought him back. But I think it speaks to, Brent Pry, loving his players and the humility. There's not a lot of guys. I've never heard of this happening ever, Chris. Have you?
We do have a couple former head coaches coming back. Bobby Petrino went back to Arkansas to be the OC after getting fired as head coach. Zach Arnett is the new defensive coordinator at Mississippi State this year, also a former head coach. But there was time off in between. They didn't go from head coach to assistant, so that is new.
So I like this a lot. That pairing between Franklin and Pry back, I think that's going to work well. This is my favorite hire of this cycle. It's this and Lane probably.
I can see it. I can see it for sure. And lastly, Kent State promoted interim head coach Mark Carney to the head coaching job. He became the interim on the eve of spring practice when Kenny Burns was fired last year, and took over a team that was 1-23 over the last 2 years. And he goes 5-7 and 4-4
They were
in
like
the MAC.
Solid, like a decent MAC team. I was. They were shocked. So bad.
Finished 4-4 overall. Solid MAC team. They beat Bowling Green. They beat NIU at the end of the year, and he gets the job. And I gave it a B. Like, that's perfectly good for a place like that. So he deserved to get to keep the job. And he's also the Prime Minister of Canada.
Yeah. That's similar to Joe Castiglione, is the AD at Oklahoma, well, former the AD at Oklahoma, and also the play-by-play guy for the Red Sox. Same situation.
Is there a does that guy have a son playing baseball? It sounds familiar. I don't know. All right, this episode has gone on much longer than I expected. Thank you to everybody who has been here for so long. We're going to end the show the way we always do, and that is by remembering some guys.
It's better than this. Guys being dudes.
I'm going to go with former Florida wide receiver Chris Doering, who was the MC of that Steve Spurrier event we started this episode with off many hours ago.
Yeah.
He one of the best wide receivers in SEC history. Works for ESPN and SiriusXM now. Great dude. Had a really, really good career as a receiver there at Florida in the early 90s. That is my guy.
I am going with Corey Davis, star at Western Michigan. I covered his last game, the Cotton Bowl.
I was at that game. We didn't even know each other back then. I had just moved down to Texas and I went to that game.
All right. There you go. But Corey Davis, he's the kind of guy who had a career. I always point to like him and Jordan Lynch as like the guys that like, I'm not sure we're ever going to see this again. 3 consecutive years at Western Michigan with 12 touchdowns and 1,400 receiving yards. Helped PJ Fleck row his boat all the way to Dallas for the Cotton Bowl. Was a top 10 pick. We're not going to talk about what happened after that. And enjoyed him a lot as a college player. A giant guy. I just remember him being huge. 6'3", 210. A lot of fun to watch. And Corey Davis, we remember you.
And we got to remember some guy nomination from listener Ty Overheiser, who sent this in about a month ago, said, "Hey guys, I was listening to the pod talking about college basketball villains back in the day, and he recommended Grayson Allen, which is a good call. As for the football side of things, I nominate Tico and TJ Duckett, a pair of Michigan State running backs from my high school in Michigan. Tico won Big Ten Offensive Rookie of the Year in 1990, while TJ went in the first round of the Falcons in 2002. I never got to see those guys play, but they were legends around the city. Also, their father, known as Coach Duckett, passed away earlier this month and was still coaching at the same high school. Thanks to the pod and all the fun." Great calls. I have used TJ Duckett before, but I didn't use Tico Duckett. So great call.
I've never heard of
including
Tico
him.
Duckett. My apologies. I know TJ, of course, but
Classic early 90s Big Ten running back, giant shoulder pads, jersey flapping, powerful
whatever happened to
dude.
giant shoulder pads? Somebody should do a story about that. I don't know.
Yeah, somebody should, David, do a story on giant shoulder pads. I wonder if one of those is coming down the pike. All right.
See.
We have been here long enough. Thank you, David, for sitting with me this whole time because you got to do some stuff tomorrow. Thank you, everybody, for listening and watching who has been here for long enough. We got some coach interviews coming up down the road. We're going to do some more themed episodes. Send your feedback to bunchformationpod@gmail.com. Send mailbag questions. We'll do a mailbag episode here pretty soon as well. So that'll do it. For David Ubben, I'm Chris Vannini. Thank you for listening and watching to Bunch Formation, and we will talk to you next week.
And if you get stuck in a roast battle, bring back the turnover chain.